In 1972, the Apollo 17 crew left a metal plaque on the lunar surface claiming they came in peace for all mankind. It is a beautiful sentiment that masks the true nature of why they were actually there. The Apollo program was a multi-billion-dollar sprint for ideological dominance. The United States and the Soviet Union were racing to prove the superiority of their political systems, and the moment the US crossed the finish line, the motivation to continue evaporated. Now, after a 50-year silence, the launch pads are lighting up again. Humans are heading back into deep space. This return is about more than repeating the past. The objective has shifted from visiting the moon to permanently claiming the territory. The first major step is ARTEMIS-II. NASA has selected a crew of 4 highly capable astronauts to be the first humans to return to the lunar environment in half a century. They will travel inside the Orion spacecraft, executing a 10-day mission that loops around the far side of the moon before slingshotting back to Earth. This mission serves as a stress test for NASA's long-term roadmap, a transition toward building a permanent surface base camp. Sustaining a crew on the surface requires a constant supply of water, oxygen, and fuel. Because shipping these from Earth is too expensive to sustain, the mission relies on finding and extracting these assets off-world. Artemis is the starting gun for Space Race 2.0, a scramble to secure the resources required to hold ground in deep space. This is the brutal math of deep space logistics. A single liter of water costs pennies on Earth, but the price of launching and landing that same liter on the moon exceeds $1 million. Any permanent base that relies on a continuous supply chain from Earth will eventually fail under its own weight. The only viable engineering solution is in situ resource utilization, or ISRU. It is the practice of living off the lunar land. At the lunar South Pole, temperatures inside permanently shadowed craters drop low enough to trap water ice within the dusty regolith. Through electrolysis, engineers split this mined water into base elements. This provides breathable oxygen for the crew and hydrogen for power. Compressing these elements creates cryogenic rocket fuel. This chemical refinement effectively turns the moon into a functional interplanetary gas station. Perfecting ISRU is the mandatory prerequisite for human expansion. Without it, the dream of a permanent base remains an economic impossibility. NASA is pivoting its strategy to meet this reality, moving away from orbiting stations to focus directly on building infrastructure on the lunar surface. To achieve the scale required for a base camp, national space agencies are partnering with private heavy lift companies like SpaceX to transport the necessary hardware. Engineers are using the moon as a high-stakes testing ground. The life support and power systems developed here are designed to eventually survive the much longer journey to Mars. Reaching that next target requires next-generation technology, such as the Space Reactor Freedom-1, a nuclear propulsion system designed to cut transit times across the solar system. The architecture of Artemis ties national prestige to corporate capability, fundamentally changing how humanity funds and executes the exploration of space. All of this sophisticated hardware is launching into a total legal vacuum. The primary law of space is the 1967 Outer Space Treaty. It was written in an era before off-world mining was possible, leaving it as an archaic moral suggestion with no way to enforce its rules. The moon is no longer just a symbolic destination. It is a strategic asset filled with rare earth metals and helium-3, a potential fuel for future nuclear fusion reactors. Geopolitical friction is rising as rival nations identify the specific, highly localized zones where these resources are concentrated. This technological scramble functions as a front for the first unregulated land grab in human history. The US-led Artemis Accords propose safety zones around lunar operations, allowing nations exclusive control over areas and bypassing traditional treaties. In response, China and Russia's International Lunar Research Station represents a competing vision for dominance, dividing Earth into 2 distinct camps. Private companies and their billionaire owners act as a wildcard in this struggle, operating with an unprecedented level of off-world power. Because these corporations operate outside of traditional diplomacy, their independent actions on the moon could escalate or de-escalate conflicts between superpowers back on Earth. The nations and corporations that build the infrastructure to survive on the moon will be the ones holding the pen to write the rules for humanity's expansion across the solar system.